within the space of a few days, so much happened. Like, I went from launching my dream podcast to now losing my job overnight. And it's like, okay, wow, something's happening here. And I think the timing of it all just seemed too specific for me not to take note of it and not to take it as a sign that there is still that element of feeling not good enough and feeling like, oh, they don't want me anymore. Oh, I wasn't good enough, which is why I had to go. So sometimes no's feel negative and you feel like, oh God, you didn't answer that prayer. But actually, him not answering that prayer sometimes is an answered prayer in itself. Look at what you have spent your money on this year. Like, where has all your money gone? Are you happy about where that money has gone? When you go back over your bank statements for the last 6 months, how much have you given to Uber? How much have you given to Deliveroo? You sit down and take stock of where your money has gone over the last year and ask yourself, Not Another Money Podcast. Why is it called Not Another Money Podcast, you may be wondering? It's because this is not your typical money show. Get ready for real money conversations and lessons, expert insights from some of our very special guests, and hear some really inspiring stories from everyday people. On this podcast, you're going to learn how to earn more, how to spend less, how to grow the difference, and most importantly, live your best financial life. And just like that, we have reached the final episode of 2024. I cannot believe it that we're actually at the end of the year. It feels like just yesterday we were saying Happy New Year. We were like making all of these plans and goals for 2024 and all the amazing things we were going to accomplish and all the things we were going to achieve. And it feels like I blinked and we are here at the end of the year. This is the final episode of 2024. So I thought I would make it a solo one. In this episode, what I want to do is do a bit of a recap, sharing some highlights from the year, things that have gone well, things that haven't gone so well, and answer some questions to share some end of year reflections. I think 2024 has been an interesting year. It's been a year of stepping out of my comfort zone and trying new things. So this podcast that you're listening to right now is something that I've wanted to start for so many years and didn't do so for so many reasons. Fear of failure being a big part of it, that imposter syndrome being another part of it, and being unsure of if there was even a need for me to start a show, given that there are so many other podcasts that talk about personal finances online. Anyway, I decided that in 2024, enough was enough, and I'm just going to do it anyway and go with it. Those that are interested will tune in, hopefully, and those that are not won't, and that's not an issue, that's not a problem. So I'm so glad that fast forward, we are 5 months into the podcast. I launched this podcast on my birthday, which was the 1st of July, 2024, of course, and fast forward to today, we've done 25 episodes. I've had on 13 amazing guests, talk about various money topics, everything from early menopause to ADHD diagnosis to having miscarriages in pregnancy. We've even spoken about grief and bereavement. We've spoken about taxes. We've spoken about a breadth of issues on this show, all of them relating in some way back to the subject of money. It's been incredible, to be honest. It's been an amazing journey. I couldn't have asked for more. Like, when I look at the Spotify recap and YouTube recap, where it kind of shows you your highlights for the year, it's been incredible to see how much growth this podcast has had over the last 5 months. In such a short space of time, we've hit 15 different countries, which is mind-blowing in itself, to think that this little podcast that I launched in my house a few months ago is now reaching Africa, it's now reaching Asia, it's now reaching Australia. Like, it's crazy to me that the podcast has been able to experience such growth in such a short space of time. Even when I look at the insights in terms of the number of downloads of the podcast on Spotify and all the podcast streaming platforms, there's hundreds of downloads of the show. But on YouTube, we're literally in the thousands, like thousands and thousands of people across the world are listening to my podcast online. It's crazy to me. It's mind-blowing to me. And it's just proof of the idea that if you just step out of your comfort zone and you do the things that perhaps make you uncomfortable, things that scare you, things that challenge you, you'll see that you experience so much growth. Like, I would never have imagined 5-6 months ago when launching this podcast that I would have on the incredible guests that I've been able to have on my show, that I would be able to reach countries that I never thought my show could reach. But here we are, fast forward nearly 6 months later, and the show's been able to do just that. So it just goes to show, like, you never know what could happen on the other side of fear. And amazing things genuinely do take place on the other side of fear. It's just about whether or not you're going to push yourself to do that thing that makes you uncomfortable, or whether you're going to allow fear to win. And I decided that 2024 was not going to be the year that I allow fear to continue to consume me and stop me from doing the things in my heart to do. Actually, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to trust God, believe God, and see what can happen. And I'm so glad that I did, because it's been an incredible journey so far. And if so much like this can happen within just 5-6 months of launching the show, just imagine where we're going to be this time next year. I'm so excited to reach my birthday next year and have the podcast running for a whole year to look at what has happened over the whole year journey. Because if this can happen at the halfway point, just imagine what's going to happen by the 1 year milestone. I'm excited for this journey ahead, and I really hope you're going to stay tuned for this journey. Even the fact that I've been able to release 25 episodes of the podcast, to me, is mind blowing, because you have to bear in mind the fact that I am a one-man band. Like, everything you see on this show, it's all me. I do the recording, I do the editing, I do the sourcing guests, I do the interview prep, the questions, like literally everything on this podcast platform, it's all me doing. Actually, I should caveat by saying my husband does help me with the studio setup, so I can't take all the credit completely, but he does help me set up for the episodes that I have special guests on. He helps me to set up the whole tech side of things, because that's the area that I'm not great in. But other than that, it's literally all me. And to think that I've been able to produce 25 episodes, to me, is mind-blowing, because it is a time-consuming process. Like, I cannot stress how much time goes into producing one podcast episode. You got to sit down and think of a concept for the show. You got to think of questions. You got to think of a guest that fits the topic that you want to discuss. You then got to invite that guest, find a day that works for you both, schedule that appointment, and then meet up, have that interview conversation, then go back after and scroll through all of that footage, edit it down to a podcast episode. That process in itself is a good 4 to 5 hours at best. And then you've got to do all the promotional stuff for it. You've got to chop it up into reels and TikTok videos, and you've got to write descriptions and captions. You've got to create covers and thumbnails. There's just a lot that goes into the production process of a podcast show. So if you made it this far in today's episode and you haven't yet shown it some love, please do, because it really does help more than you could imagine. Give it a like, give it a love heart, leave a comment, leave a review, and share it with your friends and family, because it just helps it to go out to a wider audience. And it means all this labor is not in vain, because a lot more people are getting the opportunity to benefit from the content on this show. So yeah, I'm just going to big myself up, because it's not something I do often, but it's something I need to do. I need to give myself a pat on the back for even making it to episode 25, because it is a lot of work. Like I said, I can't stress how much work goes into producing a show. If you're a fellow content creator, then you can appreciate the labor of love that it is to put this content out on a regular basis. And if you're not, just believe me, it's a lot of work. So when we're saying please like, comment, subscribe and share and all that good stuff, please actually do that, because it really does help, not only with the algorithm, but it also helps with morale, because there's nothing worse than putting out a piece of content and you hear nothing. It's just silence, crickets, and you're just thinking, is anybody listening? Is anybody home? And it just makes you think, oh my gosh, is this actually resonating with my audience? And I get a lot of WhatsApp messages or DMs or conversations with people on a daily basis where they're like, oh, I love your show. I love listening to it. Like, it's really inspiring. Your guest was really encouraging. Oh my gosh, because of what this guest said, I've done X, I've done Y, I've done Z. And all of these things are great. And I love the feedback, and it's amazing to hear it from you. But what would also be equally amazing, or probably even a bit more amazing, is if you could leave those comments on the show on YouTube or Spotify, or even on Instagram, whatever platform it is that you engage with the content on. Actually show that love on the actual post, because you telling me one-on-one is great, but it doesn't help with the whole algorithm and helping the show to grow and reach wider audiences. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now, but just to say, do show some love and engagement, because yeah, that little bit does go a really long way with helping with the growth of the channel and the platform. So as it's the final show of 2024, I thought it would be a really great time to reflect on this year and some of the things that have happened. Of course, I've spoken already about the show in itself and how well it's done and how it's exceeded my expectations by far. But one thing I haven't touched on the show is the fact that I was made redundant earlier this year. So what's interesting is that one of the things that I put on my vision board for 2024 was a picture, and I've got it here on my board and I'm looking at it now, and it says, and it's an image and it says new career, new job, bright future. And I put that on my vision board because I knew that the job I was in terms of my day job was not something that I wanted to do long term or I wanted to continue to do. I'd been in that company for about 3 years, and whilst it was amazing, I worked with incredible people. I enjoyed my workplace in terms of the environment and the people I was working alongside. I knew that what I was doing in my day-to-day role wasn't serving me anymore, and it wasn't where my passion lied, and it wasn't serving my bigger passion in terms of me doing the financial education stuff that I do online. And I wanted a day job that kind of was more in line with my passion project so that the two were kind of serving each other. And that's what I put on my vision board for 2024. And I remember at the start of the year, I had a really great opportunity or really great interview for an organization that just ticked all the boxes. And I was like, wow, this is so perfect. I put it on my vision board at the end of December. And by January, I've got this new job lined up. Oh, so I thought anyway. That's how I thought the story was going to unfold. And I thought, wow, God, this is amazing. Like I said in December, I want a new career. And by January, I've got that new career. And I remember going through the whole recruitment process. It was a 4-stage recruitment process, smashed it for the first stage, smashed it for the second stage. Even the fact that there were so many stages, I was like, wow, this is serious. Like, just give me the job already. Why am I having to go through all these stages? But anyway, made it through to the third stage. And I was just like, okay, one final stage and I've got the job. So made it to the final stage, had to do this presentation and it went great, if I do say so myself. And I was just waiting for that phone call to get that job offer, right? Um, I got that phone call and it wasn't a job offer. And I was like, excuse me. You know when you're so confident, you're just like waiting. As in, I was waiting for that phone call to come through and I was just expecting the person on the other end to tell me that the job was mine and when can I start. I didn't even consider the fact that this wasn't going to be my job just because, like I said, what I'd put on my vision board and what I really wanted to do, it just ticked every single box of what I wanted to do with my life in the new year. So I just was like, oh, I can't wait. I was just excited for that call so that I could get that job offer. So you could just imagine when that call came through and they were like, we're really sorry. Thought this was a joke. I was waiting for her to say like, we're really sorry to inform you that we need you to start next week. I thought it was going to be some kind of joke like that. You know, like what Simon Cowell used to do on X Factor. He was like, I didn't love it. I thought you were amazing. And he just says like something to throw you off and just tells you the good news next. That is what I was expecting to hear on that call. So when they were like, yeah, we're sorry to inform you, you weren't successful. We gave it to the other candidate. I couldn't believe it. I was floored. I was like, what? Wow. And in that season, I was literally like questioning, like, God, like what happened? I thought this was my job. I thought I was going to get this job. I thought this was my new career and bright future that I had planned for 2024. And you've just done it so quick for me. And it didn't happen that way, unfortunately. And I didn't get that role. And it was a bit discouraging and disheartening and not a great way to begin the year because something that I thought was mine ended up being taken from me and I didn't get it. And I continued in my role and just continued working my job that I had been working whilst also doing the content creation and financial education stuff on the side. But being in that role, knowing that this is not what I want to be doing, but not knowing where to go next, because moving from one marketing role to another marketing role, I don't think would have solved that career change problem that I had because I will still be doing what I don't really feel passionate about doing, but what I've always done. And that's not what I wanted to do with my life in 2024. So anyway, fast forward now, I was going through the year, enjoying life, creating content, working my job, managing my household, looking after my kids, etc., etc. And as my birthday was approaching, I don't know, but there's something about a new year. So whether it's a new year starting in January or a new year, my birthday, which happens to fall so nicely at the halfway point of the year. So my birthday is on the 1st of July. So it's literally 6 months into the year, I get another chance at a new year. That's how I always see it every single year. So it feels like I have 2 new years within one. So anyway, my birthday was fast approaching and July was around the corner and I was really thinking about, oh my gosh, like this year's almost halfway done and what have I achieved? Like I haven't got this new career, my platform isn't going the way I want it to go, like there's these things that I want to do but I'm not doing because I'm scared it's not going to work and I'm a bit late to the party. And all of this was going on in my head at the time and I was just like feeling overwhelmed, feeling burnt out, feeling frustrated at the position I was in and not knowing what to do about it. Anyway, fast forward, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to launch this podcast. Like, it's something I've wanted to do for so long. My birthday's coming up. It's the perfect time to do it. Like, it's my birthday, guys, so you have no choice. Please subscribe to my new podcast. Like, I feel like when you launch things on your birthday, you have a little bit more support because people are celebrating you anyway because it's your day. Why not piggy bank off the back of that and launch the show on that day? And that's what I decided to do. And I remember making this decision probably like 2 weeks to my birthday. So one thing about me is I like to do things lastminute.com. And so if I have an idea in the last minute, I'm just going to do it, regardless of if I don't have a plan of action as to how I'm going to make it a reality. I kind of say I'm going to do it and figure out how I'm going to do it later on. And that's literally what I did with the podcast. I remember telling my friend I'm going to launch this podcast, having no clue what this podcast was going to be called, how I was going to do it, what I was going to discuss on it. Obviously, I knew it was going to be to do with money vaguely, but what the rest of the show looked like, I had no clue. And I just was like, I'm going to launch it. So that's what I did. I literally came up with the idea, came up with the show name and everything, and started planning out different episodes that I could potentially do, and recorded a couple of episodes. And before you knew it, on my birthday, 1st of July, I launched the first episode. And I remember that first episode was a very honest and transparent post about how I failed as a financial coach. If you arranged my podcast by order of the oldest to the newest, you'll see that that's the first episode. And I talked all about my journey as a financial coach and why I stepped away from one-to-one financial coaching. If you're interested in hearing all about that, definitely do listen to that episode after this one. But anyway, I did that first episode and I launched it on my birthday, 1st of July. I got loads of great feedback, loads of family and friends and other followers online were resharing it and reposting it and tuning in, which was fantastic. So I was on a high, like, it's my birthday, it's my new year, I've launched my new podcast, I'm doing great. Went into the office on the 2nd of July, the day after my birthday, and I was excited. Like, I was happy to be at work because in my head I'm thinking, yes, I've launched my podcast, I'm doing great, and I'm here, but I'm not going to be here forever because I know that, this podcast is going to take off and I'm going to start making money from it, etc. So I remember being in the office, just minding my own business, and then getting called into a HR meeting, and yeah, was then told that my role was up for redundancy. And I was just like, when you're just like blindsided, like I didn't expect it in that moment because I just didn't see it coming. Obviously, organizations do what organizations need to do for whatever makes sense for the business. But for me, in my life personally, I just didn't expect it at that moment of time. Like, I've launched my podcast on a Monday, on a Tuesday, I'm being told I'm up for redundancy. On a Wednesday, my role was made redundant. So it was like such a whirlwind of a time. Within the space of a few days, so much happened. Like, I went from launching my dream podcast to now losing my job overnight. And it's like, okay, wow, something's happening here. And I think the timing of it all just seemed too specific for me not to take note of it and not to take it as a sign that I just need to go all in with this podcast that I've just launched. Because if that redundancy had happened just a week prior, you wouldn't be listening to me right now. This podcast would not exist. I wouldn't have launched it because I would have lost my job and I would have just been feeling sorry for myself, and I would have just gone down that spiral of self-pity and just feeling bad and just criticizing myself and feeling so negative, because something about being made redundant does make you feel a way. Like, even though it's not personal, it's not you being made redundant, it's your role that's being made redundant, there is still that element of feeling not good enough and feeling like, oh, they don't want me anymore. Oh, I wasn't good enough, which is why I had to go. I know myself that had I not had the podcast to hold on to and something to direct my focus to, I would have gone down that downward spiral of just, not feeling good about myself and feeling like a failure. And starting a podcast would have just dropped to the bottom of my list. If I can't even hold down a job, what makes me think I can start a podcast? Those are the kind of things that I would have been telling myself at that time. So I think the fact that it happened just after I'd launched the podcast and so close to the launch date let me know that me launching it was a good thing. And what being made redundant at that time meant is that I had so much more time now to focus on the podcast. Because even when I launched the podcast, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I've launched this thing, but how am I actually going to be able to continue to churn out content on a weekly basis, given how packed my timetable is already with the children, with work, with church, with managing a home and everything else that I have to do? Like, I knew it was kind of a mission impossible thing that I'd set out to do. But with me, I just thought if I start it, I have no choice but to figure it out. But then now I've lost my job. It's like, wow, I actually have time to really focus on this thing and really give it my best and give it my all and really work hard on it. And it just made me think that, wow, yeah, everything happens for a reason, and to everything there is a season. And at that time when I was initially made redundant, whilst it still was a little bit sad, I knew that it's something that I wanted at the beginning of the year. I didn't want to be in that role any longer. And I knew that if I wasn't pushed out, I probably would have never left. I would have just stayed there and just continued to just tick on, but not really feel satisfied or fulfilled in my role. So I feel like I wanted a new career and I had to be pushed out of that role for me to pursue it. And even though that job that I went for at the start of the year fell through, I feel like, again, that has made way and space for me to do what I'm doing now. And this show that you're listening to now, again, probably would not have been birthed had I have got that job in January, because it was a full-time role. It was quite demanding. It required me to be traveling up and down the UK. How would I have been able to do that with my family situation, with the kids being in school, with everything else I was trying to do with my social media at the time? I knew that as much as I thought I wanted that job, did it really fit my lifestyle at that time? Probably not. And so sometimes no's feel negative and you feel like, oh God, you didn't answer that prayer. But actually, him not answering that prayer sometimes is an answered prayer in itself, if that makes sense. So that's what that situation taught me. So even though it was a bit sad not to get that job that I mentioned earlier on at the start of the year, I feel like that didn't happen because I needed to get to that point where I'm just going to step out of my comfort zone and launch this thing that I really want to launch, and the thing that really gets me excited, and the thing that I really know can eventually grow to the stage that it becomes this new bright career in which I aspire to have. So yes, whilst it didn't happen in 2024, in 2025, God willing, it is going to get to that stage where, yes, my career is a full-time podcaster and a full-time content creator. But sometimes things do not happen in the timing that you want them to happen. But that doesn't mean that it's never going to happen. So just because it's delayed doesn't mean it's been denied. Another lesson I learned this year is sometimes you just need to move. And when you move, amazing things can happen. I remember initially when I launched this podcast thinking, how am I even going to be able to edit episodes on a weekly basis? Obviously, I was then made redundant, which meant I had more time on my hands. But then what I didn't appreciate is how much more time consuming it is to edit an hour plus long podcast episode versus editing like a 10-minute YouTube video, which is what I was doing previously. Like it went from me taking 2 to 3 hours to edit a 10-minute YouTube video to now I'm having to take 4 to 5 to 6 hours to edit an hour-long podcast episode. So now it's taking a lot more of my time than I initially had anticipated and than it was taken before. But at the same time, I absolutely love it. Like I can't express to you how much I love recording episodes of this podcast, like having the different conversations with these amazing guests to talk about so many different stories, hearing their inspiring stories, but also learning about certain money topics that I'm not as well versed in. It's been such an amazing experience, and I've learned so much over the last few months just by having these conversations, and it's really stretched me in ways that, again, I hadn't even considered. So I remember reaching out to some of the guests to be on the show and being a bit nervous to reach out to them. I don't know why, because like a lot of them are in the same finance space as me. But you know, sometimes you can feel that inferiority complex. I've spoken about it on previous shows before where I spoke about imposter syndrome. But when you have that kind of way of thinking where you think, you know, everybody else is killing it, everyone else is so much more ahead of me, everyone else is thriving on their platform, you can start to feel, or at least I started to feel like, why would they want to come on my show? But thankfully, I didn't allow those negative thoughts to stop me from reaching out to these guests, because so far I've had 100% success rate in terms of the guests that I've reached out to and then saying yes to come on the show. So as much as I was thinking, oh yeah, they're not going to want to come on, actually, when I had the conversations with them, they're always more than happy and willing to come on and support the platform. And a lot of them actually enjoy the show themselves. So they were like, oh, wow, thank you for the invitation. And there's me thinking, oh my gosh, thank you for saying yes to me. And they're like, no, thank you for inviting me. Another reflection from 2024 is my second annual vision board party, which I recently hosted. Oh my gosh, it was an incredible day. Like, I can't explain how blown away I was by the event. I know it was my event, so it's easy for me to say that. But genuinely speaking, it was an incredible time. Like the conversations with the different mums, the mums that I was able to meet, the inspiring stories from the speakers that we had, just the time that people had connecting with each other, sharing their stories, being open, being vulnerable, learning from one another. It was just such an amazing time. And I was just so grateful to God, number one, for giving me the idea to put this event on, but also for giving me strength to continue and persevere and actually host this event, because Last year when I did the event, I did it with so much vim because I was sure that this is the assignment that God has given me to do and I must complete it. This year, on the other hand, I had so much negative thoughts around doing this event, and I was thinking, I don't know if people are going to come to this event. I don't know if I'm going to be able to deliver an event as good as last year's. So I don't want it to be that people come this year after coming last year and be like, oh, it wasn't as good. And all of those thoughts were quite consuming to the point that I actually considered cancelling the event on many occasions. If not for my husband and one of my good friends, I would have cancelled that event. And to think of that right now is crazy, because it would have been such a shame to rob those mothers of that experience and of that event, because it was literally life changing. Like, I'm not even exaggerating, but the conversations, the inspiration, the wisdom shared in that room, like, it's one of them things that I can't even articulate well enough. You just kind of had to be there. And that's a good segue actually to say that I am looking to host another one in January, a digital version of that same vision board party for mums. If you are interested in attending the virtual event, then register your interest via the link below. And if I have enough people interested in attending the digital version, I will host that in mid to late January. Because it's not going to be the same experience as physically being in the room together. Like, you cannot recreate that magic that comes from being in that close proximity to one another. However, it can still be a great experience of actually sitting down, taking that time for yourself to really put your vision and plan for 2025 on paper. Because it's one of those things that if you don't sit down and physically do it, it never happens. And before you know it, January's going to come around. January's going to roll into March to May to July, and half of the year is going to be done, and you still haven't actually put those plans on paper and being intentional about what you want your 2025 to look like. If that is something that you'd be interested in attending digitally, then please do register your interest via the link in the description box below or in the show notes if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or any of the other amazing podcast streaming platforms. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned in 2024 is be careful what you pray for, because you might just get it. So when I was creating my vision board at the end of December, I was talking about this new career, new job, bright future. I never anticipated it will come in the way that it's come. So just being mindful of the fact that if you say it and you pray about it and it happens in a way that you hadn't expected, just be okay with that. Another great lesson that I've learned this year is how much more capable I am than I give myself credit for. So what I mean by that is sometimes these limiting beliefs make you think that you can't achieve the things that you can achieve. But when you come against those limiting beliefs and you step out of your comfort zone and you do those things which you tell yourself you can't do, it gives you that evidence of the things you're able to achieve. So when I think about this podcast and this journey that we've been on for the last 5 to 6 months, before I launched it, I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think anybody would listen to it. I didn't think I'd be able to be consistent with it. I didn't think it would build momentum. But I just said, I'm going to do it anyway. Like, at least I will try. And if it doesn't work out, then I can say I tried and it didn't work out. But I don't want to continue just going through the years, going through the motion and just always thinking, what if I did this? What if I had tried this? And I'm glad that I just this year decided, you know what, I'm not even going to allow what ifs to stop me anymore. I'm just going to do it, and whatever happens, happens. And I've actually shocked myself in my ability to commit to creating this podcast and being consistent with it and facilitating the conversations that I've been able to facilitate on this show. Like, I think I didn't realize that this was a skill that I had. Even though I've always been a conversationalist, like I could talk for England. If you know me off the podcast and you know me in real life, one of the ways people probably describe me is as a chatterbox. So I'd like to talk, which is why a podcast is just so fitting for me, right? But I don't think I appreciated my ability to have engaging conversations with people. So it's one thing being a chatterbox, right, and being able to just talk. So like right now, I'm just talking at you on the podcast and you're hopefully still listening. But it's another thing to actually have a conversation with somebody and to be able to understand what they're saying and be able to ask leading questions to get more out of them, to get them to open up and feel comfortable enough to open up and create that space for them to open up and have really meaningful conversations. And I think listening back to the show and editing the episodes, but also getting feedback from the listeners, it's a skill that I didn't even know that I really had. And I'm just glad that I was able to give myself that chance to showcase that skill and develop it as the months have been going on. And it's something I'm consciously working on cultivating and developing into 2025. I'm listening to a book right now which is all about effective communication. I can't remember the name of book right now. I'm listening to it on Audible, but it's a really great book so far. I've already taken so many lessons from it that I want to apply to my next conversation on the show. So yeah, it's a big lesson that I've learned, that I'm capable of more than I think, and I have more skills than I give myself credit for. And I think in 2025, one of the things I really want to work on is being a lot more kind to myself, give myself a lot more credit for the work that I do. Like, oh, the conversations that I have with some of my friends when they're always like, come on, Tony, you need to be kinder to yourself. You need to give yourself more credit. And it's something that I say to others too. So it's so funny that we can give the advice, but we can't take on that same advice. And it's something that I really want to lean more into in 2025, being more kinder to myself, because yeah, I'm doing all right. Do you know what I mean? I'm not doing bad at all. And I need to give myself credit for that moving into 2025. And I think you should also do the same thing. So one of the exercises that I do at the vision board party is a wheel of life exercise. And it basically is where you rank all the different areas in your life on a scale of 1 to 10. And the different areas of your life include things like family, spiritual, physical, intellectual, career, and there's a few more. There's 7 different areas of the wheel of life. And the exercise that we do at the start of the session is basically rank how we think we've done this year in that area on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. And what I always find doing that activity with the ladies is that they always tend to mark themselves very low on the different areas, even if that isn't a true reflection of how they've done in that area in the year. And that's because we often are our biggest critics. So you're scoring yourself a 5 out of 10 for family, when actually, if you step back and you think about it, like, you've kept your kids alive, number one, up until this point. You've fed them, you've clothed them, you've taken them to their different activities, you spend time with them, you read with them, you do their homework with them, you're pouring into them on a continual basis, you're cooking for them, you're cleaning for them, you're doing all these things on a daily basis for your children without being given any commendations or, a pat on the back for doing it. And I'm not saying that you should be given a pat on the back for looking after your children. Of course, that's your role, that's your responsibility, right? But if you're doing all of these things and you're doing it to the best of your ability, then why are you scoring yourself a 5 out of 10 when actually you probably could score yourself a 7 or even an 8 out of 10 in that area? None of us are perfect, so fine, don't give yourself a 10 out of 10. But actually, if you're showing up for your family in the best way that you can, you're giving all you can, then you should rate yourself and rank yourself accordingly. In terms of my proudest moment for 2024, I would say, of course, launching Not Another Money podcast was probably like the highlight in terms of my proudest moment this year. I think I'm glad that I finally stepped out of my comfort zone and did it. This is something that had been on my mind to do since pretty much when I launched my YouTube channel, and that was a good 3-4 years ago. So I'm glad that 2024 was the year that I stopped talking about it and just took action and did it. So yeah, that's definitely my proudest moment, I would say, of 2024. Did I achieve the goals that I set for myself in 2024? I achieved some of them, actually, yes. Like some of the goals I achieved this year, but a lot of them I didn't achieve, and that's okay. I can honestly say, coming to the end of the year, I gave it my best shot, and at the end of the day, that's the best that I can do, right? I think so many times we set ourselves all of these big goals, and we want to achieve the world, and we want to do all these amazing, incredible things, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's not a bad thing. But I think equally, we do need to give ourselves credit for how far we've come and what we have been able to achieve. Don't sweat the things that you couldn't do. Give yourself credit for the things you were able to do. So, like I mentioned previously, the podcast was something that I wanted to achieve this year, and I was able to do it. I wanted a new career. I've kind of been able to do it. Whilst it's not paying the way I want it to pay just yet, it's going to happen in 2025. Mark it on the wall. It's going to become a reality. But for now, it's a new direction in which I'm going in, and I'm really excited for the journey ahead. I put travel on my vision board as well. That was something I wanted to do this year. I hadn't traveled since pre-pandemic, so that was going as far back as 2018 was my last holiday. So I hadn't been on a plane in like 5-6 years. So to be able to go on 2 holidays this year was absolutely incredible. And I went back to the motherland. I went back to Nigeria in May this year, and that was amazing. Like, I hadn't been to Nigeria since I was 15. So that's a good 20 plus years ago since I last went there. And just stepping foot back on Nigerian soil, like, it hit differently. I can't even explain it, but it just felt like being home. Like, it just felt good. It was just nice just being in that environment, eating the food, soaking up the sun, soaking up the culture, reconnecting with family members that I hadn't seen in forever, and meeting family members for the first time that I'd never met before. Incredible experience, incredible trip, and I'm so glad that I was able to do that this year. It was on my vision board, and even when I put it on there, I wasn't sure how it was going to become a reality because traveling is expensive. So I wasn't sure if it was going to happen this year for me, but I'm so glad that I was able to go there. And then I was able to go on a family holiday as well for the first time with all four of the boys and my husband. So that was an incredible trip too. So we went on a trip to Spain, and it's just so nice being able to be away with my family because the boys, bless them, the last time they had traveled, I think I only had two of the boys at the time. Yeah, so two of the boys came on holiday with us back in 2018, but they were not at an age where they could even remember being on an aeroplane. So for them, it was kind of like their first holiday. So for my three older boys, it was their first time on a plane that they could recall. And they had the most amazing time. It was so nice to be able to give them that experience, just to see how in awe they were of being on the plane, being in the air, like just taking in the fact that wow, we were once in one country and now we're in another country and we're not in pictures, we're here in real life. It was just lovely to be able to have that experience with them, and God willing 2025 we'll be able to take them on a lot more holidays because yeah, I don't think you could put a price on those kind of memories that you create with your loved ones when you do things that are experience based rather than just material based. So yeah, no, it was amazing trip, and definitely a big highlight of my 2024 for sure. Challenges I faced in 2024. I faced a lot of them. Now, 2024 has been a challenging year in many ways. I'd say financially it's been very challenging because, as I mentioned earlier on in the show, I was made redundant in July. So imagine going from two incomes down to one, bearing in mind that I worked part-time and my husband worked part-time. So we basically went down from one income to half an income halfway through this year. And that's been a challenge for us financially in 2024. But God is so good that he's just been providing in ways that don't even make sense. Like on paper, we should be in a financial rut right now. Like the maths does not make sense. The budget doesn't make sense. The finances right now don't make sense. But yet we are not in debt, yet we are still able to stay afloat, yet our children are still able to do all the activities that they do, and that is just literally from miracle provisions. That's all I can say. Like he just keeps making a way where there seems to be no way, and just opening all these amazing doors for us to be able to provide for our family. So it's been challenging financially, but at the same time it's really strengthened my faith because at times where it's like, how is this going to happen, it can only be God, and he always makes a way. So that's, yeah, been a big challenge, I'd say, this year. But equally, it's been great to be able to see God at work in our lives and in our finances in this season. I'd say another big challenge that I faced this year actually is time management. Like I mentioned earlier on in the show, right? The fact that I was like, how am I going to make this podcast work because I don't have the time. I was then made redundant and I had plenty of time. But what you find is when you have more time to do something, you do less of it. That time gets wasted. I think it's Pareto's law, Parkinson's law. I think it's Parkinson's law actually, where it talks about time expanding to the time you have available. And that's what I found a lot this year. So as much as I've had more time on my hands over the last 6 months, it's felt like I have less time because I've struggled with the management of my time effectively. And this is something I'm really, really trying to get a hold of in the lead up to 2025 because I'm like, I don't have time to waste anymore. Like I'm going to be 40 very soon. That even sounds crazy to say out loud. Like, how am I going to be 40 soon? I feel like I just turned 25 yesterday, but here we are. That was a good, wow, that was like nearly 15 years ago. That is insane. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the way time is flying by is absolutely crazy. And I think what I'm learning, or what I need to learn to do in 2025, is really manage my time and schedule my time and time block my time more effectively and efficiently so that I'm getting a lot more out of my days, because I feel right now the days are just like going and I'm not achieving enough. I'm achieving stuff, but I know that if I was a lot more efficient with my time management, I could achieve a lot more and with a lot less stress. In terms of financial advice that I would give to the listeners for 2025, whilst I'm not a financial advisor, so I don't give financial advice, what I would say is now is the time to really sit down and reflect on your costs for 2024. Am I happy with what I've spent my money on in 2024? If the answer to this question is yes, then you're good to go. Continue doing more of the same in 2025. However, when you sit down and you look at those numbers and you do the maths and you do the calculations and you look at what you spent your money on in 2024, If you're not happy with what you're seeing, then it's time to really put some plans in place to make a change for 2025, because nothing changes if nothing changes. And if you're not doing anything differently in the new year, you're going to have more of the same when you sit down and look at your numbers at the end of 2025. So if you want things to look different, now's the time to take stock. Look at where your money's been going. And if you're not happy with where it's been going, make some plans to ensure you don't do the same in 2025. How can you do that? For example, if you spent £1,200 this year, for example, that's an average of £100 every month on Deliveroo. Are you okay with spending £100 on takeaways in a month? If you are, and it serves you fine, then do more of the same next year. However, if you're thinking, no, that £100 I could have invested in the stock market, then maybe think about halving the amount you're spending on takeaways, so that you're spending £50 a month on takeaways in the new year, and that other £50 you are putting in your investment account. So that's something that needs to be done before you say happy new year, so that 2025 you can hit the ground running. You don't want to be in that position where the end of the year comes and you're looking at all your outgoings and you're thinking, wait, all my money has gone, but not on things that are important to me. You want to make sure that in the new year, you are spending money in ways that align with your values and your goals. A great way to ensure you're doing this is to, of course, create a budget. I talk about budgeting a lot on my platform, and that's because a budget is so important. Like, if you don't have one in place, I will link the one I used in my show notes or in the description box below. This budget will help you to understand your numbers, know exactly how much is coming into your account on a monthly basis and how much is going out, and stick into that plan. So know exactly what you're spending on your groceries, on your transport, on your accommodation, on clothes. Everything has been allocated an amount before you spend any money that month. Tell your money where to go at the start of the month, so that when the end of the month comes, you're not wondering where all your money has gone. You know exactly where it's gone because you've budgeted, planned, and been intentional with it. I think that's a perfect way to end today's episode. I appreciate I've been talking for a long time, and if you're still with me, I salute you. Definitely give this episode a thumbs up, like it, love heart it, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of today's episode, and I will see you in 2025. That is crazy. But yeah, that is literally the last episode of the year. So the next time I see you, God willing, we will be in a new year. So I'm really excited for 2025. I have some big plans and goals and ambitions for the show for the new year, which we will discuss on our New Year's episode. But that is it for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and listening, and I will speak to you on the next one. Bye.